Text to speech, 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 speech. No, wait, that's not what we're talking about. Have you ever read a book and thought to yourself, hey, that happened to me? Like, have you ever read Three Little Pigs and realized, hey, you know what? It happened to me literally last Wednesday. A wolf blew down my house. That was crazy. No, I'm joking. But whenever we're reading, sometimes we can get reminded of things that happen to us. And that's what's called text to self. Text to self is whenever you read something, a text, and you realize and you relate to that, you relate it to your own life. It's whenever you read something, let's say you read something in a book, and in the book it said they embarrass themselves at something. A character embarrassed himself. And you read that, and you realize, wait, I embarrass myself sometimes, and I felt like the character did whenever he embarrassed himself. That is called text to self. When we read something, and we relate it to something in our own life and experience. But it's not the only text to something else relation. They have text to text. Text to text is whenever you realize that something in one text relates to something in another text. Let's say you're reading a book where a character embarrasses himself, and you realize you read another book where a character embarrassed himself and he felt the same way as the character in here. That is called text to text relation. And it's also important because we can see how people, even though they're different authors, can write about similar things, even though there might be different authors or different genres, and how they can look pretty similar in the same situations. But there's also another text to object relation, and that is text to real world. Text to real world is something you read in a text and you relate it to events that's happening in your world. Not specifically to yourself, but specifically to the world and the environment around you. Okay, let's say they mention something about bananas going bad or something, and then you read the news and then you see all the bananas are going bad. And you can relate to that text, or it could be apples inside the book, and you see the bananas going bad. You can relate that text inside to real world events. And the reason this happens, the reason we can find so many things like text to self, where we read text and we relate it to our own lives, or text to text, where we're able to read text and relate it to other texts that people wrote, or text to real world, where we can read text and relate it to real world events. We can say, hey, this is sort of similar to this real world event. It's because books and text, here, come close, I'm gonna tell you a secret. They're written by real people. What? Yeah, books and texts are all written by people, by you and me, people like you and me, who have experience inside the real world, experience reading other books, other texts, and experience in their own lives. And that's why when we read books, we can say, well, this sort of is relating to me in this situation. This is sort of relating to this in another book, or this is sort of related to the world events. Because those people who wrote those texts were people who lived through things like this, who read books and wrote books that were similar to it, who had an experience that happened in their life and they wrote about it, or who saw something happen in the world and they wrote about it, or they wrote something similar to it. And that's why we have these relations. And it's good to find these relations. So go read some text and find these relations between text to self, text to other text relations, and text to real world events. Because it makes you see that, hey, books can relate, I guess. I don't know. It didn't stay in school.